Have you ever wished you could actually see your thinking and finally get clear? If you've ever felt scattered, overwhelmed, or stuck in a fog of thoughts, you're not alone. Most of us try to do all our thinking in our heads or on screens, hoping we'll remember what matters or find answers by scrolling. But this often leaves us confused, distracted, and stressed, wondering why things feel so complicated. What if the real solution isn't another app or new technique, but something much simpler, using your own hand? Writing by hand might seem old-fashioned, but it's a powerful way to make your thoughts real. When you use a pen and paper, you're not just writing things down, you're helping your mind get clearer, calmer, and more focused. You can organize your ideas, spot what's missing, and figure out your next step, all in front of you on the page. This book is your guide to thinking on paper. You'll find practical ways to use pen and paper to organize your thoughts, solve problems, make decisions, and feel more in control. Even if you don't like your handwriting or think you're not creative, you can use these simple methods to turn confusion into clarity. You'll learn how to break big problems into smaller pieces, plan your projects, work through tough emotions, and keep your life moving forward. If you often feel lost in your thoughts, stuck making choices, or tired of forgetting what matters, this book is for you. It's for anyone who wants to feel less overwhelmed and more focused, who wants to stop just reacting and start shaping their own days. You don't have to be perfect, neat, or artistic. You only have to begin, one page, one line at a time. Let your hand help your mind. Welcome to the thinking hand. Chapter 1, Paper Wakeup. You're drowning in your own mind, and you don't even know it. Right now, somewhere in your head, there's a half-formed idea you meant to explore 3 weeks ago. A decision you've been thinking about for months. A project that started with fire and faded into guilt. You tell yourself you'll get to it. You tell yourself you just need to focus. But here's the truth. Your brain wasn't built to hold all of this. You're trying to run a complex life with a system designed for remembering where the berries grow and who owes you a favor. And every day, the gap between what you're capable of and what you actually produce gets wider. This isn't about working harder, it's about working wrong. You've been taught to type, to swipe, to consume, but never to think in a structured, deliberate way. Your screens promise productivity, but deliver distraction. Your apps promise organization, but create fragmentation. And your mind? It's stuck in an endless loop of juggling, forgetting, and starting over. The cost is real, the cost is now. The invisible overload. Your working memory can hold about 4 chunks of information at once. 4, not 40, not 14. 4. And yet you're trying to track tasks, ideas, worries, and half-remembered commitments all at the same time, all in your head. The result? Constant mental fog. You sit down to work and can't remember what you sat down to do. You have a brilliant insight in the shower, and it's gone by the time you dry off. You promise yourself you'll follow through this time, and then life happens, and the idea dissolves into the noise. This is what living without a thinking system looks like. Scattered focus, half-finished projects, and a low-grade exhaustion that never quite lifts. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just trying to run a modern life with Stone Age cognitive infrastructure. And the screens? They're making it worse. Every notification fractures your attention. Every app switch costs you momentum. You think you're taking notes when you type, but you're really just transcribing, capturing words without processing meaning. Typing is fast, frictionless, and shallow. It lets you record without forcing you to understand. So your digital notes pile up like unread emails, a graveyard of good intentions that never turned into action. You have tools for communication, tools for entertainment, tools for everything except the one thing that matters most, thinking clearly about what actually matters. The trap you're already in. Here's what happens if you keep going like this. You become smart but stuck, high input, low output. You read, you listen, you consume, but nothing sticks, nothing compounds. You start projects with energy and abandon them when the initial spark fades. Meanwhile, people with half your talent and twice your discipline are building track records, finishing things, and moving ahead. Not because they're smarter, Because they have structure. Every unresolved decision drains you. Should I take that opportunity? Should I say no to that commitment? Should I pivot or double down? These questions don't disappear when you ignore them. They loop in the background, sapping energy you could be using to actually move forward. Your brain treats everything as urgent because nothing is clearly defined. The result? Decision fatigue, burnout, a quiet cynicism that whispers, "What's the point?" And the ideas, the breakthroughs you were supposed to have, they stay locked in your head. Unrecorded insights can't be improved. They can't be shared. They can't be turned into projects or plans. They just vanish. 5 years from now, you'll look back and see a portfolio of could have been instead of I built this. That's the long-term cost of thinking without a system. What happens if you do nothing? If you don't intervene, reaction mode becomes your default. Your days get driven by other people's priorities. You're always catching up, never leading. Busy but behind stops being a temporary state and starts being your identity. Your confidence erodes, slowly, quietly, but relentlessly. Every broken promise to yourself chips away at self-trust. Every project you abandon teaches your brain a lesson. I won't finish anyway. So you start playing smaller. You stop betting on yourself. You stop starting things that matter because the pattern of failure feels inevitable. And your relationships? They take a hit. Forgotten commitments damage trust. Fuzzy communication makes you seem unreliable. People stop counting on you, not because you're a bad person, but because you can't keep track of what you said you'd do. You become known as the one who means well but doesn't deliver. That reputation is hard to shake. This is the path you're on, unless you change the system. What this book will give you. By the time you finish this book, you'll be able to clear your head on command, not through meditation or apps, through a simple handwritten brain dump process that unloads mental clutter onto a page. You'll turn swirling thoughts into tangible words and experience the shift from noise to calm, structured awareness. You'll learn to map messy problems. Using basic diagrams and layouts, you'll organize complex topics so you can see the whole picture at once. You'll break big questions into smaller, writable parts, and you'll create at least one page that turns a vague problem into a workable plan. You'll make at least one important written decision. You'll capture a choice you've been postponing, lay out the options and consequences on paper, and commit to a path with your reasons written down as proof. No more endless mental loops, just clarity, documented and actionable. And you'll plan a small project with confidence. You'll define it in one sentence, break it into milestones and next actions on a single page, and start working from your written plan instead of vague intention. This isn't theory, this is a system, and it starts with your hand. The thinking hand hypothesis. Here's the core idea that changes everything. Moving your hand on paper doesn't just record thoughts, it creates better ones. When you write by hand, you engage your brain differently than when you type. You activate motor systems, visual systems, and language systems all at once. This creates richer memory traces. You don't just remember what you wrote, you remember where on the page it was and how it felt to write it. This is kinetic cognition. The physical act of writing shapes the quality of your thinking. Writing by hand is slower than typing. That's not a bug, it's a feature. The friction forces you to compress, select, and interpret instead of mindlessly transcribing. You can't capture everything, so you have to choose what matters. That act of choosing is thinking. It's the difference between shallow recording and deep processing. This is cognitive offloading in action. Your page becomes an external brain, a place to hold ideas, connections, and half-formed thoughts so your working memory can focus on the hard work of reasoning, not remembering. Your hand, your eyes, and your page form a feedback loop. You write, you see what you wrote, you adjust, you refine. This embodied thought loop can be trained, and once it's trained, it becomes your most reliable tool for navigating complexity. The path forward. The steps ahead are simple, but they're in a specific order for a reason. First, you'll build the hand-brain link. You'll establish a daily or near-daily habit of handwritten thinking, not beautiful journaling, raw, functional thinking. Clarity of ideas, not aesthetics. You'll use repeating prompts to make starting easy every time. Then, you'll learn to think spatially on the page. You'll experiment with lists, maps, matrices, and timelines. You'll assign different areas of the page to different purposes. Ideas here, risks there, actions at the bottom. Visual cues like boxes, arrows, and underlines will highlight what matters. Next, you'll apply paper to the real stuff: decisions, emotions, and projects. You'll use specific layouts for each. You'll practice switching between capture mode, getting it all out, and clarity mode, making sense of it. Your notebook becomes the first place you go when you feel stuck. Finally, you'll bridge paper and digital. You'll start thinking on paper, then move only refined actions and ideas to your tools. Simple symbols will mark items that need digital follow-up. Paper stays your thinking engine. Digital becomes your execution archive. This sequence matters. Awareness before action, habit before structure, structure before application, integration, not replacement. Each step builds on the last. Skip one, and the whole system wobbles. The identity shift. There are two kinds of people in this world. Losers treat thinking as something that just happens in the head. They blame distraction and busyness, but never change their process. They say, "I'm just not organized," and wear chaos like a badge of honor. They stay stuck. Winners treat thinking as a skill that can be trained deliberately. They build simple, repeatable routines instead of chasing hacks. They accept temporary discomfort, slower writing, new habits for long-term clarity. They move forward. The shift you need to make is simple, but non-negotiable. Stop saying, "I'm overwhelmed," and start saying, "I'm the kind of person who thinks on paper." See your notebook as your control center, not a side accessory. Decide that letting your potential stay trapped in your head is no longer acceptable. This book will show you how, but only if you're willing to pick up a pen and prove it. What comes next will teach you how to forge the link between your hand and your brain, the foundation everything else is built on. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Hand-Brain Link. There's a circuit in your brain that's been dormant for years, maybe decades. It connects your hand to your thoughts in a way that no keyboard ever could. When you were young, before screens took over, you used it constantly, forming letters, drawing shapes, scribbling notes in margins. But somewhere along the way, you traded depth for speed. You started typing everything, and that circuit, it went quiet. Here's what most people don't realize. When that circuit goes dormant, your thinking gets shallower. Not because you're less intelligent, but because you've stopped engaging the parts of your brain that create rich, sticky, actionable understanding. You've been using a tool designed for transcription, the keyboard, to do work that requires transformation, and it's costing you more than you know. This chapter is about waking that circuit back up. It's about turning your hand into a precision instrument for thought, not for writing pretty sentences or keeping a diary, but for thinking clearly under pressure, for processing complexity, for turning noise into signal and vague ideas into concrete plans. But first, you need to understand why this matters more than any other habit in this book. The foundation you can't skip. Everything that comes later, the maps, the decision frameworks, the project blueprints, depends on this one thing, a trained hand-brain connection. Without it, those techniques are just interesting ideas you'll try once and abandon. With it, they become reflexes, tools you reach for automatically when complexity hits. Think of this chapter as building the engine. The rest of the book gives you the vehicle, the roadmap, and the destinations. But if the engine's weak, you're not going anywhere. You'll stall out. You'll revert to old patterns. You'll end up back where you started, overwhelmed, reactive, and stuck in your head. The fastest way to clearer thinking isn't to learn more techniques. It's to train your hand first. Because once your hand knows how to think on paper, every other technique becomes easier to execute, faster to deploy, and more likely to stick. This is mental strength training, and like any training, consistency beats intensity. 5 minutes a day, every day, will rewire your brain faster than occasional hour-long sessions. The goal isn't to fill notebooks, it's to make clarity your default state instead of a rare event. Why your keyboard is sabotaging you. Typing feels productive, your fingers fly, words appear on screen, you're capturing everything. But here's the trap. Speed creates the illusion of depth without delivering the real thing. When you type, you're transcribing. You're moving words from one place to another, from a speaker's mouth to your screen, from a book to your notes app, from your head to a document. But transcription isn't thinking, it's copying, and copying doesn't force you to understand. Handwriting is different. It's slower, deliberately, frustratingly slower. And that slowness is where the magic happens. Because when you can't capture everything, you have to choose. You have to compress. You have to ask yourself, what actually matters here? What's the core idea? How would I explain this in my own words? That act of choosing, of filtering and distilling, is thinking. It's the difference between a typed transcript you'll never read again and a handwritten summary you can actually use. One is passive recording, the other is active processing. Try this experiment. Next time you're in a meeting or watching a talk, type notes for the first half, then switch to handwriting for the second half. A week later, try to recall what was discussed. You'll remember the handwritten half better. Not because you wrote more, but because you thought harder while writing it. The neuroscience you need to know. When you write by hand, something unusual happens in your brain. Multiple systems activate at once: motor control, visual processing, spatial awareness, language centers. Your hand moves, your eyes track. Your brain encodes not just what you wrote, but where on the page it sits and how it felt to form those letters. This is called deep encoding. It's why you can sometimes remember an idea by remembering where you wrote it. Top left corner, halfway down the page, circled in the margin. The physical act of writing creates a richer memory trace than typing ever could. There's also something called motor memory of ideas. You don't just remember the words, you remember the motion of writing them, the rhythm, the pressure, the slight pause before a key insight. This embodied memory makes ideas stickier, more retrievable, more yours. And then there's the friction, analog friction, the slight resistance of pen on paper, the effort required to keep your hand moving. This friction isn't a bug, it's a feature. It forces you to slow down just enough to engage with the material instead of skating over it. It turns passive consumption into active interpretation. Your keyboard removes all that friction. It's frictionless by design. And in doing so, it removes the very thing that makes learning stick. Your hand as a scalpel. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop thinking of writing as a way to remember things. Start thinking of it as a way to understand things. Your pen isn't a recording device. It's a scalpel. It cuts through confusion. It separates signal from noise. It takes a messy, half-formed thought and carves it into something clear and usable. When you write by hand, you're not just capturing ideas, you're upgrading them. Raw thoughts become structured ideas. Vague worries become specific problems. Scattered inputs become coherent summaries. This is the real power of the hand-brain link. It transforms thinking from something that happens to you into something you do deliberately. And the more you practice, the sharper the scalpel gets. Your hand learns patterns. It learns how to compress without losing meaning. It learns how to spot what matters and ignore what doesn't. It learns how to turn complexity into clarity in real time. This doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than you think. A few weeks of daily practice, and you'll notice the difference. Your thoughts will feel clearer. Your explanations will get sharper. Your decisions will come faster. Not because you're smarter, but because you've trained a circuit that most people let atrophy. The daily ritual that changes everything. The core practice is simple. Pick a time, pick a place, and write by hand for 5 to 15 minutes. That's it. No fancy setup, no perfect conditions, just you, a pen, and a page. Start with one sharp question. Not a vague prompt like, what am I thinking about, but something specific. What matters most today? Or, what's the biggest problem I'm facing right now? Or, what did I learn this week that I want to remember? Then write, continuously, no editing, no crossing out, no stopping to check your phone. Just keep the pen moving until the timer ends. If you run out of things to say, write, I don't know what to write until something real shows up. It always does. This isn't journaling. It's not therapy. It's thinking practice. You're training your hand to keep up with your brain. You're teaching yourself to externalize thoughts instead of letting them loop endlessly in your head. You're building the habit of clarity. The question matters more than you think. A sharp question gives your mind a target. It focuses your attention. It prevents the session from drifting into aimless rambling. Over time, you'll develop a library of questions that work for you, prompts that consistently unlock insight. And here's a trick. End each session by writing a question for tomorrow. Seed the next session before you close the notebook. This creates continuity. It makes starting easier. It turns each session into a link in a chain instead of a standalone event, turning inputs into insight. Most people consume information like they're drinking from a fire hose. Articles, podcasts, videos, books, it all pours in, and most of it pours right back out. A week later, they can't remember what they read. A month later, it's gone completely. The hand-brain link changes that. After you read something important or listen to a talk that matters, close the source. Don't look back at it. Open your notebook and write a 5 to 10 line summary from memory in your own words. This forces retrieval. It forces compression. It forces you to ask, what was actually important here? What's the core idea I want to keep? How does this connect to what I already know? Then add one more line. How will I use this in my life this week? This turns knowledge into action. It bridges the gap between interesting idea and thing I actually do. Without that line, most insights stay theoretical. With it, they become practical. If an idea is particularly confusing, try rewriting it 2 or 3 times, each version shorter than the last. Ask yourself, how would I explain this to a friend on a walk? What's the simplest way to say this without losing the meaning? When the idea feels simple and concrete enough to act on, stop. You're done. This is how knowledge becomes wisdom. Not through accumulation, but through distillation. Your notebook becomes the place where everything you consume gets filtered, compressed, and transformed into something you can actually use. The lies you tell yourself. You're going to resist this. Your brain will offer excuses. Let's address them now. Typing is faster, so it's better. Speed isn't the goal. Understanding is. A fast transcript you never review is worth less than a slow summary you can actually use. Stop confusing motion with progress. My handwriting is bad, so this won't help me. Legibility is not the point. Clarity of thought is. Even messy handwriting creates deep encoding. Even scribbles force you to choose what matters. Use shorthand, use symbols, use bullet points. Just write. I can think just fine in my head. Maybe. Until the problem gets complex. Until the pressure spikes. Until you're juggling 3 projects and 5 decisions and a dozen half-formed ideas. Then fine breaks down, and you're back to overwhelm. Top performers externalize their thinking because it frees mental bandwidth for the hard work of reasoning, not remembering. What happens when you commit? If you do this, if you build the daily habit, if you train the circuit, if you make your hand a thinking tool, here's what changes. At first, you'll feel a little clearer after each session, a little more grounded. You'll start remembering more of what you learn. You'll catch your own sloppy thinking on paper before it turns into sloppy action. Then over weeks, you'll notice something bigger. You'll be able to explain complex ideas simply because you've handwritten them. You'll rely on your notebook to prepare for meetings, tough conversations, and high-stakes decisions. You'll see patterns in your thoughts, recurring worries, repeated mistakes, hidden assumptions, and you'll start fixing them. And eventually, if you stick with it, you'll become the person others turn to when things get messy. The one who can take chaos and turn it into clarity. The one who makes decisions without endless second-guessing. the one who finishes what they start because they have a system that works. You'll feel a deep sense of control, not because life gets easier, but because your hand can always lead your mind back to clarity. No matter what happens, you have a tool that works, a circuit that fires, a practice that holds. But here's the thing. None of this happens if you don't start, and none of it sticks if you don't make it small, simple, and repeatable. Keep your notebook in sight. Forgive skipped days. Use a pen that feels good in your hand. Seed tomorrow's session before you close the page today. Make the barrier tiny. Make the habit inevitable. Make clarity your default. Because once your hand knows how to think, the rest of this book becomes a toolkit you'll actually use. And the next tool, the one that turns blank pages into visual maps of your mind, is waiting just ahead. Chapter 3, Page Maps. Your brain doesn't think in lines. It thinks in webs, networks, clusters of connected ideas that branch and loop and intersect in ways no paragraph can capture. But look at your notes. Look at how you've been trying to think on paper, straight lines, top to bottom, left to right. One thought after another, marching down the page like soldiers in formation. You've been forcing your thinking into a structure that fights against how your mind actually works. And it's costing you. Because when you can't see the structure of a problem, when you can't see how the pieces connect, where the gaps are, what depends on what, you can't solve it. You can only circle it. Endlessly. This chapter is about breaking free from the tyranny of lines. It's about turning your page into something more powerful, a canvas where ideas can spread out, connect, and reveal themselves in ways that linear notes never could. It's about making the invisible architecture of your thinking visible. But here's what most people miss. This isn't about drawing pretty pictures. It's about thinking faster, seeing deeper, and communicating clearer. It's about building a visual language that lets you handle complexity without drowning in it. Why linear thinking fails? Lists are useful. Paragraphs have their place. But when you're facing a truly complex problem, one with multiple causes, competing priorities, hidden dependencies, and uncertain outcomes, lines break down. A list can't show you that A causes B, which influences C, which loops back to affect A. A paragraph can't reveal that your three biggest challenges are actually symptoms of the same root issue. Linear notes can't help you see that the solution you're chasing might create three new problems you haven't considered. Complexity needs structure, and structure needs space. When you spread ideas across a page, when you use position, proximity, and visual relationships to encode meaning, patterns jump out. Connections become obvious. Contradictions reveal themselves. The fog lifts. Here's a test. If you can't draw it, you probably don't fully understand it. Try explaining your current biggest challenge in a paragraph. Now try mapping it on a page with boxes, arrows, and clusters. The map will force you to clarify what you've been keeping vague. It will expose the gaps in your thinking. It will show you what you actually know versus what you've been assuming. And once you can see the structure, you can work with it. You can identify leverage points. You can spot which pieces matter most. You can design interventions instead of just reacting to symptoms. The speed of sight. One glance at a well-made diagram tells you more than rereading 3 pages of dense text. Your visual system is fast, absurdly fast. It processes spatial relationships, patterns, and hierarchies in milliseconds. But it can't do that with paragraphs. It has to decode words, reconstruct meaning, hold pieces in working memory, and assemble them into a mental model. Maps skip that step. They are the mental model, external, visible, reviewable. This is why visual thinking speeds insight. When information is spatially arranged, your brain doesn't have to work as hard to find patterns. Proximity signals relationship, size signals importance, position signals sequence or hierarchy. Your eyes do the work that your working memory used to struggle with. And when you're drowning in information, when you're trying to make sense of a complex topic, a messy project, or a high-stakes decision, speed matters. The faster you can see the whole picture, the faster you can act on it. But there's another benefit most people overlook: communication power. A clear map doesn't just help you think, It helps others understand what you're thinking. You can show someone a single page and they instantly get it. No long explanation needed. No confusion. No misalignment. This makes you valuable. The person who can take chaos and turn it into a diagram that everyone can work from. That person becomes indispensable. That person gets trusted with bigger problems. That person leads. Breaking the linear cage. Your page is not a prison. Those horizontal lines, ignore them. They're suggestions, not rules. The whole space is yours. Center, corners, margins, every inch can carry meaning if you let it. Start thinking of your page as a canvas, not for art, but for thought. A place where you can arrange ideas the way your brain naturally organizes them, in clusters, hierarchies, flows, and networks. The simplest way to break free is to stop starting at the top left. Start in the center instead. Write your main question or topic in the middle of the page. Circle it. Now you have a hub. Everything else radiates out from there. This is the beginning of a mind map. Branches extend from the center, each one representing a major subtopic or dimension of the problem. Smaller branches extend from those, capturing details, examples, or questions. The structure mirrors how your brain actually associates ideas, from core concepts to related thoughts to specific details. But mind maps are just one option. Sometimes you need a timeline, a horizontal line that shows sequence, dependency, or progression over time. Sometimes you need a matrix, a grid that lets you compare options across multiple criteria. Sometimes you need zones, distinct sections of the page dedicated to different types of thinking. The key is matching the structure to the problem. Open-ended exploration, mind map. Sequential process, timeline. Trade-off analysis, matrix. Mixed thinking, context, ideas, risks, actions, zones. Your job is to choose the right map for the job, and the only way to get good at that is to practice with all of them. The grammar of visual thought. You already know how to read visual language. You just haven't been using it to think. An arrow means flow or causation. A box means a discrete thing, an action, a decision, a milestone. A circle means an idea or concept. A triangle can signal risk or a decision point. These aren't arbitrary, they're a grammar, a visual syntax that lets you encode relationships without words. When you draw an arrow from A to B, you're saying A leads to B, or A causes B, or A comes before B. When you put two ideas close together on the page, you're signaling they're related. When you separate them with white space, you're saying they're distinct. This is nonlinear thinking. Instead of forcing ideas into a sequence, you arrange them in the way they actually connect. Causes near effects, related concepts clustered together, competing options side by side for comparison. And here's the thing, your brain already thinks this way. It's been building these networks in your head all along. You're just making them visible. You're externalizing the structure so you can see it, test it, and improve it. Start simple. Use circles for ideas, boxes for actions, arrows to show relationships. That's enough to map most problems. Over time, you can develop your own symbols, your personal legend, but don't overcomplicate it. The goal is speed and clarity, not artistic perfection. The excuses you'll make. You're going to resist this. Your brain will tell you it's too hard, too slow, too unfamiliar. Let's deal with those excuses now. I'm not a visual person. Yes, you are. You navigate space. You recognize faces. You understand maps and signs and diagrams every day. You don't need to be an artist to draw a circle, a box, and an arrow. That's all this requires. Diagrams take too long. A 3-minute sketch can save you hours of confusion. Compare the time you spend rereading messy linear notes, trying to reconstruct what you meant, versus glancing at one clear map. The map wins. Every time. And if you're really in a hurry, learn micromapping, a rough diagram in under a minute. Just enough structure to capture the key relationships and move forward. You can always refine it later if you need to. I need software to do this right. No, you don't. Software gives you infinite options, which means infinite decisions about fonts, colors, layouts, and connectors. That slows you down. It pulls you out of thinking mode and into design mode. Paper is faster. Paper is spontaneous. Paper lets you think at the speed of your hand, not the speed of a menu system. Use software later if you need to share or archive, but do the thinking on paper first, always. How to build your first map. Let's make this concrete. Open your notebook. Pick a problem you're currently facing, something with multiple moving parts, unclear priorities, or competing options. Write the core question or topic in the center of the page. Circle it. Now ask yourself, what are the main dimensions of this problem? What are the big pieces? Draw a branch for each one, radiating out from the center. Label each branch with 1 to 3 words. Keep it short, keep it fast. Now, for each branch, ask what details, examples, or sub-questions belong here. Add smaller branches. Keep going until the page feels full but not crowded. If you run out of space, start a new page. Don't cram. That's a mind map. Simple, functional, powerful. Want to try something different? Draw a horizontal line across the middle of the page. This is your timeline. Mark key events, stages, or milestones along the line. Add notes above or below for context, risks, or dependencies. Now you can see the whole sequence at a glance. Or try zones. Divide the page into 4 sections with light lines. Label them: context, ideas, risks, next steps. Fill each zone in order. This forces you to think systematically, to separate what's true from what's possible, from what could go wrong from what you'll actually do. The structure you choose matters less than the act of choosing one. Because once you commit to a structure, your thinking sharpens. Vague becomes specific. Overwhelming becomes manageable. Making it stick. Here's how you turn this from an interesting technique into a reflex. First, use shapes as meaning. Decide that circles always mean ideas, boxes always mean actions, triangles always mean risks. Write this legend at the back of your notebook. Now, every map you draw uses the same visual language. This makes them faster to create and easier to read. Second, embrace white space. Don't fill every corner. Leave gaps. Let important elements breathe. Use empty space to visually separate themes or phases. A crowded page is a confused page. Third, label for the future you. Add a clear title and date at the top of each map. At the bottom, write a one-line summary, what this page is about. If a map connects to another page, draw an arrow and note the page number. Your notebook becomes a network, not just a stack of isolated pages. And here's the most important trick. Draw the structure before you add the words. If you're making a mind map, draw the center circle and main branches first. If you're making zones, draw the dividing lines first. If you're making a timeline, draw the axis first. This prevents you from sliding back into linear notes. It commits you to the structure. It makes spatial thinking the default instead of the exception. What changes when you master this? At first, you'll be able to map out meetings and lectures in a way that's easy to review. You'll feel less overwhelmed when facing complex topics. You'll start seeing connections you previously missed. Then, as you practice, you'll be able to take a messy problem and show its structure on a single page. You'll use maps to plan conversations, presentations, and projects. Others will find your diagrams helpful and start asking for them. And eventually, you'll become the default sense maker in your environment. The person who can walk into a chaotic situation, ask a few questions, and sketch a map that makes everything clear. You'll be able to rapidly map new information into existing mental frameworks. Your notebooks will become a library of reusable mental models, structures you can apply again and again. But none of this happens if you let perfectionism stop you. Your first maps will be rough. That's fine. Give yourself a strict time limit, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and sketch the first version. Treat it as a draft. Only improve it after you've used it once and seen what works. And if your maps get cluttered, limit yourself to 3 main branches or sections per page. If you need more, start a new page. Clarity beats completeness. The goal isn't to create museum-quality diagrams. The goal is to think better, faster, and clearer, to see what you couldn't see before, to turn invisible complexity into visible structure. Because once you can see it, you can solve it. But seeing structure is only half the battle. Sometimes the real problem isn't that your thinking is unclear. It's that it's too clean, too polished, too afraid to be wrong. And that's where the next chapter takes you, into the messy, raw, unfiltered space where real breakthroughs happen. Chapter 4. Messy Clarity. The best thinking you'll ever do will look terrible. Crossed out lines, half-finished sentences, arrows pointing nowhere, words scribbled in margins, ideas that contradict each other 3 lines apart. This is what real thinking looks like when it's happening, not after it's been cleaned up for presentation, but during the messy, uncertain process of figuring things out. And yet, most people never let themselves think this way on paper. They wait. They hesitate. They want their first draft to be their final draft. They treat their notebook like a stage instead of a lab. And that perfectionism, that need for everything to be tidy and correct from the start, kills the very thing notebooks are supposed to enable: raw, unfiltered exploration. Here's the truth. Clarity doesn't come from avoiding mess. It comes from moving through mess, from dumping everything out, seeing what's actually there, and then, only then, finding the signal in the noise. The people who think clearly aren't the ones with perfect notebooks. They're the ones who've learned to tolerate chaos long enough to extract insight from it. This chapter is about giving yourself permission to be messy, not as a failure of discipline, but as a deliberate strategy, because the mess is where the breakthroughs hide. The perfectionism trap. You've been lied to about how thinking works. Somewhere along the way, you absorbed the idea that good thinkers produce polished thoughts on the first try. That clarity should arrive fully formed. That if your thinking is messy, something's wrong with you. But that's not how it works. That's never how it's worked. Every clean idea you've ever encountered started as a tangle. Every sharp insight began as a vague hunch. Every breakthrough emerged from a pile of failed attempts, dead ends, and half-baked theories. The difference between people who produce clear thinking and people who stay stuck isn't that one group thinks cleanly and the other doesn't. It's that one group is willing to show their work to themselves on paper and the other isn't. When you wait for the perfect system, the perfect moment, the perfect first sentence, you're not being careful. You're procrastinating. You're choosing beautiful inaction over ugly progress. And while you wait, the problem you're trying to solve stays unsolved. The decision you're trying to make stays unmade. The idea you're trying to develop stays locked in your head, slowly fading. Fast, ugly thinking beats beautiful procrastination, every single time. Why hiding your thinking keeps you stuck. Thoughts that stay in your head stay vague. They shift. They morph. They feel important one moment and trivial the next. You can't pin them down. You can't test them. You can't improve them because they're invisible. The moment you write something down, even if it's wrong, even if it's incomplete, even if it contradicts what you wrote 2 lines earlier, it becomes visible. And visible things can be worked with. You can look at them, question them, refine them, cross them out, and try again. This is why visible mistakes are data, not shame. When you see a crossed out line on your page, you're not looking at failure. You're looking at evidence of your thinking process. You're seeing the path you took, the assumption you tested, the direction you tried before changing course. That's valuable. That's useful, because the next time you face a similar problem, you'll remember, I tried that approach before. It didn't work. Here's why. Your messy pages become a training ground, a place where you can fail small, learn fast, and get better at thinking without the stakes of real-world consequences. But only if you let yourself be messy. Only if you treat your notebook as a lab, not a performance stage. The patterns you can't see until you write. Here's something most people never discover. When you write messily and regularly, patterns emerge. You'll notice that the same worry shows up every Monday, that the same excuse appears whenever you face a certain type of decision, that you keep circling back to the same 3 ideas even when you think you've moved on. These patterns are invisible when your thinking stays in your head. They're too fluid, too changeable, but on paper, they're undeniable. You can flip back through your notebook and see it. I wrote this exact thing 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks before that. This isn't a new problem. This is the problem. That recognition is the first step towards solving it. Because once you see the pattern, you can design a strategy to break it. You can ask, why does this keep coming up? What am I avoiding? What would it take to actually resolve this instead of just thinking about it again? Messy pages don't just capture your thoughts. They reveal your thinking habits. The places where you get stuck, the questions you avoid, the stories you tell yourself over and over. And once you see those habits clearly, you can change them. The permission you've been waiting for. Let your hand move faster than your inner critic. That's the core practice of messy clarity. When you sit down to think on paper, your job isn't to produce something polished. It's to get everything out. All the half-formed ideas, all the contradictions, all the noise. Don't pause to judge. Don't stop to edit. Don't worry about whether it makes sense or sounds smart. Just keep the pen moving. If you think of something, write it. If you change your mind, cross it out and write the new thought. If two ideas connect, draw an arrow. If you don't know what to write next, write, I don't know what to write next, until something real shows up. This is expression first, organization later. You're separating the two phases that most people try to do simultaneously, and that's why they get stuck. Generating ideas while simultaneously evaluating them is like trying to drive with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. You go nowhere. Instead, dedicate one session to pure generation. Set a timer for 5 to 15 minutes. Write everything that's in your head. No filter, no structure, just raw output. Use arrows, side notes, quick doodles, whatever helps you capture connections as they appear. Then later, maybe an hour later, maybe the next day, you come back and harvest. You skim the mess for the few ideas worth keeping. You pull out the insights. You summarize the chaos into a few sharp sentences. You turn the raw material into something usable. But the raw material has to exist first, and it only exists if you give yourself permission to be messy. Creating your scratch space. Here's a practical move. Dedicate a section of your notebook or a separate notebook entirely to messy thinking. Label it. Make it official. This is your scratch space, your lab, the place where nothing has to be perfect. Use this space for brain dumps, for half ideas that might go nowhere, for emotional noise that needs to get out of your head, for questions you don't have answers to yet, for contradictory thoughts that you need to see side by side. The key is removing the pressure to get it right on the first try. When you know a page is just for exploration, you write differently. You take more risks. You follow tangents. You let yourself be wrong. And that freedom is where the good stuff happens. As you write, add quick symbols to mark different types of content. A star for ideas worth revisiting. An exclamation point for actions you need to take. A question mark for things you're uncertain about. Don't stop to process these marks. Just tag them and keep moving. You'll harvest them later. At the end of each messy session, take 30 seconds to circle or box the most important marks. This gives you a quick visual scan for when you come back. You don't have to reread everything, just the parts you flagged as valuable. The weekly harvest. Messy pages are useless if you never review them. The mess is the raw material. The harvest is where you extract value. Once a week, pick a fixed day and time, skim your recent messy pages. Look for patterns. Look for recurring themes. Look for the ideas that showed up multiple times, the questions that keep nagging you, the insights that felt important when you wrote them. Copy those onto a clean summary page. Not everything, just the top 3 to 5 insights, decisions, or actions. Write them clearly. Write them in a way that your future self can use. Then add a short reflection at the bottom. What am I learning about how I think? This turns the harvest into a feedback loop. You're not just extracting ideas, you're observing your own thinking process. You're building self-awareness. You're getting better at recognizing when you're stuck, when you're avoiding something, when you're onto something real. This is ink-based metacognition. You're using your pages as a mirror, and the more you look, the more you see. Making mess work for you. Write bigger than usual. This breaks the habit of tiny, neat handwriting that slows you down. Use quick lists and fragments instead of full sentences. Let arrows jump across the page to show sudden connections. Make it physically loose. Make it feel like movement, not careful construction. Build a ritual around your messy sessions. Choose a regular time, Sunday evening, first thing in the morning, whenever works, and pair it with something you enjoy. A favorite chair, a specific playlist, a cup of something warm. Make it feel like a safe, private check-in with yourself, not a chore. And here's the most important trick. Reward the act, not the aesthetic. Track how many days in a row you showed up on the page, regardless of what you wrote. Celebrate the messy pages that led to real decisions and actions, not the ones that look pretty. Resist the urge to rewrite messy pages purely for looks. The mess is the point. The lies you'll tell yourself. If it's messy, it's useless. Wrong. Messy thinking is part of every creative process, every breakthrough, every solved problem. Clarity is the result of mess, not its absence. You don't start clear. You get clear by working through the mess. Real thinkers have tidy notebooks. Also wrong. High performers have messy drafts, scribbles, revisions, crossed out lines. What you see in curated images, the perfect spreads, the color-coded notes, those are highlights. They're not reality. They're the final output, not the process. Your lab can look chaotic while your output is sharp. In fact, it probably should. I have to organize while I write. No, you don't. Editing while writing slows you down and shuts you up. It activates your inner critic before you've had a chance to generate anything worth criticizing. Separate the phases. Use one session for dumping, use another for structuring. Don't try to do both at once. What changes when you embrace the mess? At first, you'll feel less blocked, more willing to start writing. You'll experience relief after dumping mental noise onto paper. You'll begin noticing patterns in your worries and ideas, the same themes showing up again and again. Then, as you practice, you'll be able to trace how your thinking on a problem evolved over time. You'll see the path from confusion to clarity. You'll regularly extract actionable insights from messy pages. You'll feel safer experimenting with ideas because you know the page can handle chaos. And eventually, you'll build a personal archive of raw thinking that fuels future projects. You'll stop fearing confusion because you know you can work through it on paper. You'll become more original and decisive because you've trained in the messy gym of your notebook. You've learned to tolerate uncertainty long enough to find the answers hiding inside it. But here's the catch. If you never review the mess, nothing changes. Pages pile up. Insights stay buried. The practice becomes a habit without impact. So schedule that weekly harvest, 15 minutes, fixed day and time. Pull only the top 3 to 5 insights or actions. Make it small. Make it sustainable. And if the chaos starts to feel overwhelming, add a 3-line summary at the bottom of each messy page right after you write it, or use a highlighter to mark only what truly matters on reread. Give yourself scaffolding. Make the mess manageable. If you feel shame or self-judgment when you look at your pages, remind yourself, this is a lab, not a public performance. Turn judgment into data. Ask, what does this tell me about what I need to work on? Your messy pages aren't evidence of failure. They're evidence of effort, of showing up, of doing the hard work of thinking when most people just react. The mess is where you learn. The mess is where you grow. The mess is where the real you shows up on the page, unfiltered and honest. And once you've learned to think messily, once you've built the habit of dumping and harvesting, you're ready for something more focused. Something that takes all that raw material and channels it toward the moments that matter most. The decisions that shape your life. Chapter 5, Decision Pages. You're carrying decisions you haven't made yet, right now, in your head. Should you take that opportunity or stay where you are? Should you commit to that project or keep your options open? Should you say yes to that request or finally learn to say no? These questions don't disappear when you ignore them. They loop, they drain energy, they occupy mental real estate that could be used for actual thinking, actual creating, actual living. And here's what makes it worse. Most of the time, you're not even making a real decision. You're just feeling your way through it. You wait to see how you feel tomorrow. You check your mood. You let fear or excitement or exhaustion make the call. And then, weeks or months later, you look back and wonder why you keep ending up in the same situations, making the same mistakes, regretting the same patterns. The problem isn't that you're bad at deciding. The problem is that you're trying to decide in your head, where emotions shift, where biases hide, where complexity overwhelms. Your head is a terrible place to make important choices. But your page can hold the whole decision still. It can make the invisible visible. It can turn agonizing into actionable. This chapter is about turning your notebook into a decision engine, a place where choices get documented, analyzed, and locked in, not based on how you feel in the moment, but based on what actually matters. Your life is built from choices. Every major outcome in your life, your career, your relationships, your health, your bank account, flows from thousands of micro decisions. What you said yes to, what you said no to, what you started, what you quit, what you ignored, what you prioritized. Most people treat decisions like weather, something that happens to them. They react. They go with the flow. They trust their gut without questioning whether their gut is shaped by fear, recency bias, or the mood they woke up in. And for simple choices, what to wear, what route to take, what to watch, instinct works fine. But for complex, high-stakes decisions, the ones that shape your future, instinct alone fails, because your gut can't hold multiple variables at once. It can't weigh long-term consequences against short-term comfort. It can't separate what you want from what you need. If you don't design your decisions, you surrender your future to impulse and habit. You become predictable, reactive, stuck in loops you can see but can't break. The alternative is simple: externalize the decision, put it on paper, make it visible, make it workable. From mood to method, "I'll see how I feel" is not a strategy, it's a gamble. Because how you feel changes, hour to hour, day to day. You feel confident on Monday and terrified on Tuesday. You feel motivated in the morning and defeated by evening. And if your decisions depend on catching yourself in the right mood, you'll either never decide or you'll decide inconsistently. Compare that to a written, repeatable process, a system that works regardless of how you feel, a page that holds the decision steady while you think it through, a structure that forces you to name your options, weigh your trade-offs, and commit to a path with reasons you can stand behind. Disciplined decisions feel harder up front. They require effort. They require honesty. They require you to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. But they're easier long term, because once the decision is made and documented, it's done. You're not revisiting it every time your mood shifts. You're not second-guessing yourself into paralysis. You're moving forward. And here's the hidden benefit. Every unmade decision drains you. It occupies mental space. It creates background noise. When you get pending choices out of your head and onto paper, you free up bandwidth. You reduce decision fatigue. You make room for the thinking that actually matters. Over time, you'll build a small library of decision layouts, templates you can reuse for similar choices. Career decisions, money decisions, commitment decisions. Each one gets faster and lighter because you're not starting from scratch. You're following a process you've already proven works. Turning fog into questions. Most decisions stay hard because they're poorly defined. You're trying to decide something vague. Should I make a change? Is this the right move? What should I do about this situation? Vague questions produce vague answers, or worse, they produce endless rumination with no resolution. The first move is to rewrite the decision as a sharp, answerable question at the top of your page. Not, should I think about changing jobs, but do I accept the offer from company X or stay at my current role for another year? Not, what should I do about my relationship, but do I commit to working on this relationship for 6 months or end it now? Notice the difference. The sharp question forces a choice. It names the options. It sets a time frame. It makes the decision decidable. You also need to distinguish between what do I want and what is possible right now. Wanting something doesn't make it an option. Wishing doesn't create pathways. Your decision page should only include choices you can actually take, not fantasies you can't execute. And here's a trick. Use wording that forces a choice, which one, instead of whether or not. When you frame a decision as which, you're already committed to choosing. When you frame it as whether, you leave the door open to endless delay. The architecture of choice. The way you lay out a decision on the page shapes how you think about it. This is decision architecture, and it's more powerful than most people realize. Start with the core layout. At the top, write your central question in bold, specific language. Below that, list your main options, 2 to 4, no more, in a left column with short labels. Use the right side of the page for consequences, risks, benefits, and required resources. Reserve the bottom for your final choice, your reasoning, and your immediate next step. This structure does something subtle but critical. It separates the options from the analysis. It prevents you from mixing everything into a chaotic mental soup. You can see each option clearly. You can compare them side by side. You can evaluate them against the same criteria. For major decisions, try backward mapping. At the top of the page, describe your ideal outcome in one precise sentence. What does success actually look like? Then, below that, list the conditions that must be true for that outcome to exist. What has to happen? What has to change? Work backward from those conditions to actions you can take this week. This forces you to think from the end state, not from your current confusion. And don't hide your constraints. Write them down honestly. Time, money, skills, support. If an option requires resources you don't have and can't get, it's not a real option. Acknowledging constraints isn't pessimism, it's clarity. Criteria, not feelings. Here's where most people go wrong. They evaluate options based on how they feel about them, not on what actually matters. Instead, define 3 to 5 criteria that genuinely matter for this decision. Learning, impact, alignment with long-term goals, financial stability, flexibility, whatever your real priorities are, not what sounds good, but what you'd actually regret ignoring. Draw a simple grid, options on one axis, criteria on the other. Score each option quickly, 1 to 5, high or low, whatever scale makes sense, and add brief notes to explain your scores. This forces you to evaluate systematically instead of emotionally. Then, identify your must-not-violate criterion. The one thing that, if compromised, makes the whole decision wrong. Maybe it's integrity. Maybe it's time with your family. Maybe it's creative control. Whatever it is, name it. Then check every option against it. If an option violates your non-negotiable, it's out, no matter how attractive it looks otherwise. This isn't about removing emotion from decisions. Emotion matters. Your gut has data. But emotion should be one input alongside logic, evidence, and long-term thinking. Not the only input. The lies that keep you stuck. I just trust my gut. Fine. But your gut is shaped by fear, bias, and whatever happened to you recently. It's not a crystal ball. It's a pattern-matching system that can be wrong, especially for decisions outside your experience. Integrate intuition, yes, but don't let it override everything else. Big decisions are too complex for one page. Wrong. Complexity often hides poor thinking, not deeper truth. If you can't explain a decision on one page, you probably don't understand it well enough to make it. Use the page constraint to force simplification. Strip away the noise. Get to the essentials. Treat the one-page limit as a test of your clarity. Writing it down won't change anything. Try it and see. Written commitments feel heavier than vague intentions. When you write, "I choose X because Y," you've created a record, a stake in the ground, something you can review later and learn from. What you don't write down, you can't reliably improve. You'll just repeat the same patterns, make the same mistakes, and wonder why nothing changes. Making it practical. Limit your options to limit paralysis. Cap yourself at 3 main choices. If you have more, merge similar ones into variants or eliminate the weakest. When you're overwhelmed, use a simple triad: keep, change, or drop. And if you're stuck between 2 options, ask, if I could only pick between A and B, which one? Force the choice. Break the tie. Add time horizons to each option. What happens in 1 week? 1 year? 5 years? This zoom out prevents short-term comfort choices that sabotage long-term goals. Highlight any option that looks good now but disastrous later. That's a trap, not a solution. And here's the move that compounds over time. Reuse and refine your layouts. Create recurring templates for similar decision types. Career moves, financial commitments, project priorities. Compare old decision pages to new ones. See how your thinking quality improves. Adjust your templates based on what actually led to better outcomes. Your decision pages become a feedback loop, a training system, a way to get better at choosing, not just once, but systematically. What changes when you commit? At first, you'll make decisions faster, less mental back and forth, less revisiting the same question in your head. You'll experience less regret because your reasoning is explicit. You know why you chose what you chose. Then, as you practice, you'll start identifying patterns in your good and bad decisions. You'll see which criteria you tend to ignore, which biases you fall for, which fears drive you more than you'd like to admit. And you'll refine your personal standards over time. You'll feel steady and deliberate when others panic or rush. Eventually, you'll build a personal playbook of decision pages you can adapt and reuse. People will seek you out when they face tough calls because you can map them clearly. You'll shape your career, projects, and life direction with intent instead of drift. But here's the trap. You can fill the page and still not decide. You can use writing as another form of procrastination. The fix? Add a visible deadline at the top. Decision locked by date time. Force a choice by circling one option and writing why this, not the others. Make the page a commitment device, not a delay tactic. And watch for bias. You'll subtly write more positives for the option you already want. Counter this by adding a devil's advocate section where you argue against your favorite. Ask yourself, what would a brutally honest friend write on this page? Let that voice speak. Finally, don't just decide and forget. Schedule a follow-up note on each big decision page 30 to 90 days later. Add 3 lines. What happened? What did I misjudge? What will I change next time? This turns decisions into data, into lessons, into a system that gets sharper with every choice. Because decisions aren't just about choosing. They're about learning to choose better. And that only happens when you make your reasoning visible, reviewable, and improvable. But even the best decisions mean nothing if you can't handle what comes after. The emotions, the doubts, the internal noise that threatens to derail everything you've committed to. And that's where the next chapter takes you, into the space where feelings meet ink. Chapter 6, Emotional Ink. You made a decision, a good one, clear, documented, rational. And then 2 days later, doubt crept in. Fear whispered. Resentment built. Suddenly, the choice you made with such clarity feels wrong. Not because the logic changed, but because your feelings changed. And now you're second-guessing everything, spiraling, stuck in a loop of what if, and maybe I should have. This is the problem no decision framework can solve on its own. Emotions don't follow logic. They don't respect your carefully drawn matrices. They don't care about your 3 to 5 criteria. They show up uninvited, hijack your thinking, and derail your plans, unless you have a way to process them. Most people try to ignore emotions, push them down, power through, or they do the opposite. They let emotions run wild, venting to anyone who will listen, scrolling for distraction, numbing out. Neither works. Ignoring emotions doesn't make them disappear. It makes them louder. And venting without structure just rehearses the pain without resolving it. There's a third way, a way that doesn't require you to become a therapist or spend hours journaling about your childhood. It's simpler than that. It's about using your hand and your page to turn emotional fog into something you can actually work with. This chapter is about emotional clarity, not emotional perfection, not endless self-analysis, just enough clarity to stop emotions from sabotaging your decisions, your relationships, and your focus. The hidden driver. Here's what most people don't realize. Emotions drive decisions far more than logic does. You think you're choosing rationally. You think you're weighing options, considering consequences, being strategic. But underneath, fear is steering you away from risk. Shame is keeping you small. Anger is pushing you toward choices you'll regret. And you don't even notice because emotions are invisible. They operate below the surface, shaping your rational thinking without announcing themselves. A decision that looks logical on paper is often just an emotional decision with a thin coat of logic painted over it. You're not choosing the best option, you're choosing the one that feels safest, or the one that lets you avoid a hard conversation, or the one that protects your ego. This isn't weakness, this is human, but it's also a problem, because if you can't see what's driving you, you can't steer. You're reactive, controlled by whatever emotion happens to be loudest in the moment. Emotional clarity is a performance edge. It's not soft, it's strategic. When you can name what you're feeling, separate it from what's actually true, and decide how to respond instead of just reacting, you gain control. You make better calls. You stay steady under pressure. You stop sabotaging yourself. The cost of unprocessed feelings. Unresolved emotions don't fade, they loop. That frustration you didn't deal with on Monday? It's still there on Thursday, draining your focus, making you irritable, leaking into unrelated conversations. That anxiety you ignored last week? It's the reason you can't sleep tonight, replaying worst-case scenarios on repeat. This is mental noise, and it's expensive. It occupies bandwidth. It slows you down. It makes simple tasks feel exhausting because part of your brain is always running in the background, trying to manage feelings you haven't processed. You think you're saving time by not dealing with emotions, but you're not. You're wasting time. Hours spent distracted, days spent procrastinating, nights spent overthinking. All because you haven't taken 10 minutes to get the noise out of your head and onto a page. Writing is a cleaner release valve than venting or numbing out. Venting just rehearses the emotion without resolving it. Numbing, scrolling, binging, avoiding just delays the reckoning. Writing lets you see the emotion, name it, understand it, and then decide what to do about it. And here's the relationship angle most people miss. Unclear feelings lead to unclear conversations. When you don't know what you're actually upset about, you can't communicate it. You either explode, dumping everything in a messy, hurtful way, or you shut down, saying, "I'm fine," when you're clearly not. Written processing helps you speak calmly instead of exploding. It helps you figure out what you actually need to say before you say it. It turns emotional journaling into prep work for better communication. You're not just venting into the void. You're preparing to show up clearly in the conversations that matter. Naming the invisible. Most people live in emotional vagueness. I feel bad. I'm stressed. I'm just off today. That's not enough. Vague feelings stay vague. They don't resolve. They don't give you anything to work with. The first move is to turn feelings into words. Specific words. Not "I feel bad, but I feel disappointed." Not "I'm stressed, but I'm anxious about this deadline and resentful about that request." The more precise the label, the smaller the monster becomes. This is the power of language. What you can describe, you can handle. When you write, "I'm feeling anxious," you've already started to contain it. Anxiety is no longer this overwhelming cloud. It's a specific thing with a name, and named things can be addressed. Convert vague emotional weight into concrete sentences. I'm angry because I feel disrespected. I'm scared this won't work out and I'll look foolish. I'm sad because I wanted this to go differently. These sentences give you something to work with. They reveal what's actually happening underneath the noise. And here's the key. Once you've named the feeling, you can separate it from the facts. Because most of the time, what you're upset about isn't what happened. It's the story you're telling yourself about what happened. Facts, stories, and shifts. This is the core technique. It's simple, it's powerful, and it works. Divide your page into 3 sections. Label them facts, story, shift. Under facts, write only what an unbiased camera would record. No interpretation, no judgment, just the observable reality. They didn't respond to my message. The meeting was rescheduled. I made a mistake on the report. Under story, write what you're telling yourself about those facts. This is where the emotion lives. They didn't respond because they don't respect me. The meeting was rescheduled because my work isn't a priority. I made a mistake because I'm incompetent. See the difference? The facts are neutral, the story is loaded, and the story is what's creating the emotional charge. Now, under Shift, rewrite the story into something more accurate and helpful. Not positive thinking, not fake optimism, just a more balanced interpretation. They didn't respond yet. They might be busy. The meeting was rescheduled for reasons I don't know. I made a mistake because I was rushing, and I can fix it. This isn't about denying your feelings. It's about testing your interpretations. Most of the time, the story you're telling yourself is only one possible explanation, and usually not the most accurate one. When you rewrite it, you reduce the emotional charge. You create space to respond instead of react. The inner dialogue. Sometimes separating facts from stories isn't enough. Sometimes you need to let the competing voices in your head actually talk to each other on the page. Create 2 columns. Label one Panicked Me and the other Coach Me. Let Panicked Me write freely for a few lines. No filter. Let the fear, the doubt, the worst-case thinking spill out. I'm going to fail. Everyone will see I'm a fraud. I should just quit now before it gets worse. Then switch to Coach Me. Respond with empathy, clarity, and specific next steps. I hear you. This feels scary, but you've handled hard things before. What's one small step you can take right now to move forward? Go back and forth. Let Panic Me respond. Let Coach Me guide. Keep the dialogue going until the emotional charge drops, until Panic Me runs out of fuel and Coach Me has a clear path forward. This is externalizing the inner dialogue. Instead of letting these voices fight invisibly in your head, you're giving them space on the page. And when you can see them both, you can choose which one to follow. The 10-minute reset. When you're flooded, when the emotion is too big, too fast, too overwhelming, you need a quick process, not a long session, just a reset. Set a 10-minute timer. Open your notebook. Answer 3 prompts. What am I feeling? Name it. Be specific. Angry, scared, ashamed, overwhelmed, disappointed. Whatever it is, write it down. Why? What triggered this? What happened or what didn't happen? What story am I telling myself? Get it out. Fast. No editing. What can I do next? Not what should I do about my whole life. Just what's one small, concrete action I can take in the next 24 hours that will help? One conversation, one decision, one step. End with a single sentence. Given all this, I will. Make it tiny. Make it doable. Make it something you can actually commit to. This process doesn't solve everything, but it stops the spiral. It gives you a foothold. It turns emotional chaos into a manageable next move. The lies you'll believe. Journaling is just complaining on paper, only if you stop at the dump. Structured writing leads to insight. The move from dump to decision is what makes this work. You're not wallowing, you're processing, and processing leads to action. If I write it down, it will feel worse. Yes, there's a spike. Naming hard feelings is uncomfortable, but that spike is temporary. After it passes, the intensity drops. You gain distance, you gain control, short-term discomfort for long-term relief. That's the trade. I don't have time for this. You don't have time not to do this. Unprocessed emotion wastes hours. It leaks into your work, your relationships, your sleep. A 10-minute page can save you a day of mental noise. Reframe emotional writing as performance maintenance. You're not indulging, you're optimizing. Making it stick. Use the same prompts repeatedly. Reduce resistance by knowing exactly what to write each time. Track growth by comparing how your answers change over weeks and months. Build familiarity so your brain sees this as a safe, predictable process. Anchor writing to emotional spikes. Decide that intense emotions are your cue to pick up the pen. Replace doom scrolling with a quick reset page. Use a simple rule. If I'm stuck for more than 20 minutes, I write. And close each session with commitment. Finish with given all this, I will gore. Keep commitments tiny. One call, one message, one step. Review past commitments to see how often you act on your own advice. This turns emotional processing into behavioral change. What changes over time? At first, you'll feel lighter and calmer after writing through tough moments. You'll stop bottling everything up. You'll start relating to your feelings as data, not disasters. You'll experience fewer sudden outbursts. Then, as you practice, you'll catch unhelpful stories early and rewrite them before they drive behavior. You'll handle criticism, conflict, and setbacks with more steadiness. You'll become more honest with yourself about what you want and fear. Eventually, you'll become emotionally reliable under pressure, for yourself and others. You'll use emotional clarity to make better strategic decisions. You'll build a long-term record of your emotional growth and resilience. But watch for the traps. If your pages decay into repetitive complaints with no change, add a mandatory shift in action section to every emotional page. Ask, what am I willing to do differently this week because of this? If you avoid writing when you need it most, pre-decide a rule. Strong emotion equals automatic 5-minute writing. Keep a tiny portable notebook specifically for crisis moments. And if you're afraid of someone reading your pages, use a clearly marked private notebook and store it intentionally. Develop a light code or shorthand for sensitive details while keeping meaning clear to you. Because emotional clarity isn't optional, it's the foundation. Without it, every decision you make, every plan you build, every goal you set, all of it sits on shaky ground. But clarity alone isn't enough. You need a way to turn clarity into action, to take the insights, the decisions, the emotional processing, and build something real, something that moves you forward. And that's exactly where the next chapter takes you. Chapter 7, Project Blueprints. You have ideas, lots of them. A project you've been meaning to start, a skill you want to build, a goal that's been sitting in the someday pile for months, maybe years. You think about it, you get excited, you imagine what it would be like when it's done, and then nothing. The idea stays an idea, the project stays unstarted, the goal stays vague and distant. This isn't about laziness, it's not about lack of ambition. You want to do these things, but wanting isn't enough. Because between I want to do this and I did this is a gap most people never cross. That gap is called execution. And execution doesn't run on inspiration, it runs on structure. Ideas are easy, finished projects are rare. The difference between people who accumulate a track record and people who accumulate regrets isn't talent or time. It's the ability to turn vague ambitions into concrete, actionable plans. To take something big and intimidating and break it down into pieces small enough to actually execute. This chapter is about building that ability. It's about turning your notebook into a project engine, a place where goals stop being dreams and start being blueprints you can follow, step by step, until they're done. The weight of undefined ambition. Here's why big goals feel so heavy. They're not goals, they're bundles. Undefined bundles of tasks, decisions, and unknowns all tangled together in your head. Write a book, launch a business, get in shape. These aren't plans, they're directions. And directions without steps just create anxiety. When a goal lives only in your head, it stays vague. You can't see the whole thing. You can't see what comes first. You can't see what's actually required versus what's optional. So every time you think about it, your brain treats it as one massive, overwhelming thing. And massive, overwhelming things get avoided. But here's the shift. A one-page plan can dissolve a lot of that anxiety. When you take the bundle and spread it out on paper, when you define the outcome, break it into milestones, and list the immediate next actions, the project stops being a weight and starts being a map. You can see where you're going. You can see the first step. And suddenly, I don't know where to start becomes, here's step 1. This is what structure does. It converts overwhelm into clarity. It turns a vague wish into a concrete commitment. And it gives your brain something it can trust, a visible plan that doesn't require you to hold everything in your head at once. Why finishing matters more than dreaming. People remember who finishes, not who has ideas, not who talks about what they're going to do, who actually does it. Reliability is a competitive advantage. In a world where most people start strong and fade out, being the person who consistently completes what they start makes you valuable. It builds trust, with others, yes, but more importantly, with yourself. Every unfinished project is a broken promise to yourself, and broken promises compound. Your brain starts to assume, I won't finish anyway. So you stop starting. You stop betting on yourself. You play smaller because the pattern of failure feels inevitable. Written project blueprints break that pattern. They turn finishing from a personality trait into a process, a repeatable, improvable process. You're not relying on willpower or motivation, you're following a structure, and structures work even when you don't feel like it. This is how you become the finisher in your circle, not by being more talented, not by working harder, by having a system that carries you from start to done, consistently, over time. From wish to outcome. The first move is to stop thinking in terms of goals and start thinking in terms of outcomes. A goal is vague. I want to get better at public speaking. An outcome is specific. By March 15th, I will have delivered 3 talks to audiences of at least 20 people. See the difference? The outcome is measurable. It's time-bound. It's observable. You'll know without question whether you hit it or not. There's no wiggle room, no kind of or sort of, just done or not done. At the top of your project page, write this sentence: by date, I will have score core. Fill in the blank with something concrete, something you can point to and say, yes, that exists now. Not I will be more confident, but I will have completed a course and practiced 10 times. Not I will explore options, but I will have interviewed 5 people in the field and written a decision page. Make sure the outcome is within your influence. You can't control whether someone hires you, but you can control whether you apply to 10 positions. You can't control whether your work goes viral, but you can control whether you publish it. Focus on what you can actually do, not what you hope will happen. And check yourself. Is this ambitious but achievable? If it's too easy, you won't grow. If it's too hard, you'll quit. Find the edge, the place where success requires effort but isn't dependent on luck alone. Breaking it into milestones. A project without milestones is just a finish line in the distance. You can see where you want to end up, but you have no idea if you're making progress. Milestones fix that. They're checkpoints, proof that you're moving forward. Identify 3 to 5 major chunks of progress between now and your outcome. Not every tiny task, just the big, meaningful stages. If your outcome is launch a website, your milestones might be content drafted, design finalized, site built, site tested, site live. Each one is a distinct phase. Each one gets you closer. Place these milestones in approximate time. Week 1, weeks 2 through 3, end of month 1. You're not building a Gantt chart. You're creating a rough timeline so you can see if you're on track or falling behind. And here's the key. Include at least 1 milestone you can hit within the next 7 days. This gives you immediate momentum. It proves the project is real, not just another someday idea. You're not waiting for perfect conditions. You're starting now. Avoid the trap of micro-detailing. Don't list every single subtask under every milestone. Keep milestones chunky and meaningful. If you need more granularity later, you can always add it, but start with the big picture. Start with the structure. Defining what happens next. Milestones tell you where you're going. Next actions tell you how to get there. Under each milestone, write 3 to 5 concrete actions, not vague intentions, specific executable steps. Start each one with a verb. Email this person. Draft this section. Research these options. Call that contact. Schedule this meeting. The more specific the action, the less resistance you'll feel when it's time to start. Work on the project is paralyzing. Draft the introduction using the outline I already made is doable. One is a vague cloud. The other is a clear instruction. Make these actions visible on the page, not just in your head. When you can see them written down, your brain treats them as real commitments, not optional thoughts. And when you check them off, you get proof of progress. Tangible, visible proof. For each milestone, mark the one action you'll do first. Circle it, star it, underline it, make it unmissable. This is your entry point, the thing that gets the milestone moving. Everything else can wait. But this one happens first. Anticipating what could go wrong. Most projects fail not because the plan was bad, but because reality didn't cooperate. You ran out of time. You hit a skill gap. You depended on someone who didn't deliver. These aren't surprises. They're predictable risks, and if you can predict them, you can plan for them. Reserve a section of your project page for obstacles. What could realistically block your progress? Be honest. Don't sugarcoat. Don't assume everything will go smoothly. It won't. Time constraints, skill gaps, dependencies on other people, budget limits, competing priorities. Write them down, make them visible. Because once they're visible, you can design countermoves. For each risk, add one simple response: what you'll do if it shows up. If time runs short, which milestone gets compressed? If you hit a skill gap, where will you learn, or who will you ask? If someone doesn't deliver, what's your backup plan? This isn't pessimism, it's preparation. And preparation is what separates people who finish from people who stall out the moment something goes wrong. The one-page rule. Here's the constraint that makes this work. 1 page. That's it. No sprawling documents, no multi-tab spreadsheets. 1 page per project. This forces compression. It forces you to ask, what truly matters here? What's essential versus what's nice to have? If it doesn't fit on 1 page, it's either not clear enough or not important enough. Use abbreviations. Use keywords instead of paragraphs. Use symbols and shorthand. Make the page dense but readable. And if you truly need more detail, if a milestone requires its own breakdown, create a supporting page, but keep the main blueprint clean and simple. The 1-page rule is a test of your understanding. If you can't explain the project on 1 page, you probably don't understand it well enough to execute it. Simplify, clarify, strip away the noise. Keeping it alive. A blueprint isn't a static artifact, it's a living document. Reality changes, you learn things, timelines shift, the page has to shift with it. Choose a fixed day each week to revisit your project pages. Sunday evening, Friday afternoon, whenever works. Spend 10 to 15 minutes per project. Update statuses, adjust dates, cross out completed actions, add new ones if needed. Use a different pen or style for updates so you can see the evolution. Ask yourself 3 questions. What did I move forward? What stalled? Why? This turns your blueprint into a feedback loop. You're not just executing, you're learning how to execute better. And add visual priority cues. Write the most important milestone larger. Use symbols, stars, arrows, exclamation points to mark non-negotiable tasks. Draw a small progress bar or checklist you can fill in as you advance. Make the page work for you. Make it a tool that guides your attention, not just a record of intentions. The lies that keep projects unfinished. I need complex tools to run projects. No, you don't. Software can help later, but it can't replace clear thinking. Use paper first to clarify, tools later to track. Complexity often hides poor thinking, not deeper truth. Big goals are too complicated for 1 page. A good 1-page summary clarifies the whole. If it doesn't fit, you're including things that don't matter. Compress. Ask what truly matters here. Treat anything that doesn't fit as optional, not essential. If I stay motivated, I'll figure it out. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Clear plans carry you when motivation dips. And here's the twist. Motivation is often the result of progress, not the cause. You don't wait to feel motivated. You start, make progress, and motivation follows. What changes when you build blueprints? At first, you'll stop losing track of projects once they get complex. You'll always know at least one clear next step. You'll feel less overwhelmed when starting new work. Then, as you practice, you'll manage multiple projects without constant mental chaos. You'll be able to show someone a single page and they'll instantly understand your plan. You'll develop realistic expectations about timing and effort because you'll have data from past projects. Eventually, you'll become known as the person who reliably finishes what they start. You'll accumulate a stack of completed project pages, proof of execution, not just intention. And you'll use your blueprinting skill to lead teams, not just yourself. Because people follow those who can turn vision into action. But watch for the traps. If you spend hours optimizing the blueprint but never move, end every planning session by circling one action and doing it immediately. Time box planning to 30 to 45 minutes per project. Planning is not doing. Don't confuse the two. If your plans become outdated quickly, treat the blueprint as a living document. Cross out, rewrite, adjust. Add a small version date so you know when it was last refreshed. Reality changes. Your page should change with it. And if you consistently underestimate effort and time, if everything takes longer than you expect, keep a short planning mistakes note on the page. Capture your misjudgments. Learn from them. Add buffer time by default. Plan around reality, not fantasy. Because the goal isn't perfect plans. The goal is finished projects. And finished projects come from simple, clear, written structures your brain can trust. But even the best blueprint is useless if it lives in isolation, if it never connects to the rest of your life, if it stays trapped on paper and never makes it into the systems that actually run your days. And that's the bridge you'll build next, the one that connects thinking to doing, paper to digital, clarity to execution. Chapter 8, Hybrid Workflow. You've been thinking on paper, mapping problems, making decisions, building project blueprints. Your notebook is filling up with clarity, insight, and plans. And then you open your task manager, or your calendar, or your notes app, and none of it's there. The thinking you did on paper? It's trapped on paper. The tasks you identified? Still handwritten. The deadlines you set? Not in your digital system. So you're living in two worlds that don't talk to each other. This creates friction. You have to remember what's in your notebook and what's in your apps. You have to manually bridge the gap every time. And when the friction gets high enough, one system wins and the other dies. Either you abandon paper and go back to shallow digital capture, or you abandon your apps and lose the ability to coordinate, remind, and share. Both options suck, because paper alone isn't searchable. Digital alone isn't deep. You need both, but you need them working together, not fighting for dominance. This chapter is about building that bridge, a simple, sustainable workflow where paper and digital become teammates instead of rivals, where your notebook stays your thinking engine and your apps become your execution archive, where the best of both worlds actually means the best of both worlds. The problem with choosing sides. Most people treat this as an identity question. Am I a paper person or a digital person? Wrong question. High performers don't choose. They use both intelligently. They recognize that each medium has strengths worth exploiting. Paper is slow, spatial, and deep. It forces you to think. Digital is fast, searchable, and scalable. It helps you execute and coordinate. You don't need to pick one. You need to design a system where each tool does what it does best. But here's what happens when you don't. You end up with notebooks you never review and apps you never trust. Your paper becomes a graveyard of good ideas that never made it into action. Your digital tools become cluttered with half-thoughts you captured but never processed. And the gap between thinking and doing gets wider. The alternative is a translation layer, a simple, repeatable process that moves the right things from paper to digital at the right time. Not everything, just the essentials. The tasks that need reminders, the dates that need calendars, the insights that need to be searchable later. This isn't about creating more work. It's about reducing the mental load of living in two disconnected systems. It's about turning your workflow from a source of stress into a quiet support structure that just works. What lives where? The first move is to get clear on what belongs on paper and what belongs in digital. Without this clarity, you'll waste energy deciding every single time. And decision fatigue around your own system is a recipe for abandonment. Here's the rule. Paper is for thinking. Digital is for doing. Use paper for brainstorming, for decisions, for emotional processing, for planning, for anything messy, evolving, or uncertain. Keep these things offline where they can change freely, where you can cross things out, where you can think without the pressure of creating a final version. Your notebook is the first stop for any new challenge or concept. When something's unclear, when you're stuck, when you need to figure something out, reach for paper first. Let it be messy. Let it be rough. Let it be the lab where ideas get tested and refined. Then, once clarity emerges, once you know what needs to happen, once the decision is made, once the plan is solid, then you move the essentials into digital. Not the whole page, just the refined output, the tasks, the dates, the commitments, the insights worth keeping. Digital becomes your command center for reminders and coordination. It's where you track what needs to happen when. It's where you store information you'll need to search later. It's where you share plans with others. But it's not where you think. That happens on paper. This division of labor is what makes the system sustainable. You're not duplicating effort. You're not trying to make one tool do everything. You're using each tool for what it's actually good at. The translation layer. Here's how you build the bridge. As you write on paper, mark items that need to move into your digital system. Use simple, consistent symbols, an @ sign for tasks, a calendar icon or cal for dates, an arrow or save for ideas you want to store long term. Don't stop to transfer them immediately. Just tag them. Keep writing. Keep thinking. The tagging takes 2 seconds. It doesn't interrupt your flow. And when you're done with the page, you have a visual scan of what needs to move. Then, at a fixed time, end of the workday, Sunday evening, whenever works for you, you do a sync. Open your notebook and your digital tools side by side. Scan your recent pages for the symbols. Transfer tasks to your task manager. Transfer dates to your calendar. Transfer key insights to your notes database. And here's the critical part. Check off the transferred items on the page. Draw a small box next to each symbol and check it when it's moved. This gives you visual confirmation. You know it's captured. You're not carrying the mental load of, did I move that or not? Keep the sync short, 10 to 15 minutes, max. You're not reorganizing your entire life. You're just moving the essentials from one system to another. Fast, clean, done. One home per thing. Here's a mistake that kills most hybrid systems: scattering tasks and notes across multiple apps. You have tasks in your email, tasks in a project management tool, tasks in a notes app, tasks scribbled on random digital sticky notes. And because they're scattered, you don't trust any of them. So you end up back in your head trying to remember everything, which defeats the entire point. Fix this. Pick one main app for tasks. 1, not 3, not 5. 1, it doesn't matter which one. What matters is that you commit. All tasks from your notebook go into that app, nowhere else. Same with long-term notes. Pick one app for storing insights, references, and evergreen ideas. When you tag something on paper with save, it goes there. Always. No exceptions. Let your notebook feed these two homes instead of competing with them. Your notebook is the source. Your apps are the destinations. Clear roles, no overlap, no confusion. And if you're tempted to add more tools, resist. Every new app is a new decision point, a new place to check, a new source of friction. Simplicity scales, complexity collapses. The scanning trap. You'll be tempted to scan everything, to photograph every page and dump it into a cloud folder. Now it's digital, now it's searchable. Not quite. Photos of pages without context become digital clutter. They're hard to search, hard to review, hard to use. Scanning is storage, not thinking. It's a way to archive, not a way to process. Use scanning strategically. Photograph only high-value pages, the maps that clarify complex problems, the decision pages you'll want to review later, the project blueprints you'll reference as you execute. Not every brain dump, not every messy page, just the ones that contain refined, reusable structure. And when you do scan, tag, or title the images with clear keywords, Project X Blueprint, NOV 2025, Decision, Career Move, OCT 2025. Make them findable, make them useful. Otherwise, they're just digital junk taking up space. Photos are references, not your primary thinking space. They're backups, they're archives. They're not where the work happens. The work happens on paper and in your focused digital tools. Keeping it simple. Draw a mini flow diagram at the front of your notebook, something like paper think, tag mark, sync, digital do. 4 steps, 1 line, visual reminder. Review this diagram when you feel the urge to overcomplicate your system, when you're tempted to add another app, another integration, another layer of automation. The diagram reminds you, keep it simple, keep it human, keep it sustainable, and adjust the diagram as your system evolves. Maybe you add a weekly review step. Maybe you change your sync timing. Fine, update the diagram, but keep it simple. If the flow takes more than 1 page to explain, it's too complex. Complexity is seductive. It feels productive. It feels like progress, but it's a trap. The more complex your system, the more energy it takes to maintain, and the more energy it takes, the less likely you are to use it. Simple systems get used, complex systems get abandoned. The lies you'll tell yourself. I have to choose, paper person or digital person. No, you don't. That's a false binary invented by people selling you one solution. You're someone who designs tools to serve your thinking, not someone who obeys tools. If I scan everything, I'm done. Scanning is not processing, it's not thinking, it's just moving pixels around. Don't confuse activity with progress. Automation will save me, maybe, but automation can't fix poor thinking. If your paper process is unclear, automating it just creates unclear digital output faster. Get the thinking right first. Then, if automation helps, add it sparingly. The goal isn't to build the perfect system. The goal is to build a system that works, that you actually use, that reduces friction instead of creating it. What changes when you get this right? At first, you'll stop losing important ideas between notebook and apps. You'll be able to find what you need with less hunting and frustration. You'll feel less guilty about unfinished systems because your system is actually functioning. Then, as you refine it, your digital tools will contain only relevant, refined information. No clutter, no noise, just the essentials. You'll confidently rely on both notebook and apps without confusion. You'll spend more time thinking and acting, less time managing tools. Eventually, you'll build a seamless ecosystem where paper creates clarity and digital executes it. You'll gain a reputation for being both deep thinking and highly organized. People will wonder how you do it, and your system will scale as your responsibilities grow without becoming a burden. But watch for the traps. If you don't sync regularly, tasks and ideas get stuck on paper and never reach your systems. Fix this by linking your sync window to a daily or weekly habit. After lunch, Sunday evening, whatever works. Make it automatic. Make it non-negotiable. If you try to transfer everything, you'll overwhelm yourself. Only transfer actions, commitments, and evergreen insights. Trust your notebook to hold raw thinking. Digital is for distilled value, not comprehensive archives. And if you keep switching apps, trying new task managers, new note apps, new productivity systems, you'll reset your workflow again and again. Commit to one task app and one notes app for at least 90 days. Put your rules in writing, what goes where and why. Then stick to it long enough to see if it works. Because the system isn't the point. The system is just scaffolding. What matters is what you build with it, the decisions you make, the projects you finish, the clarity you maintain, the life you design. And once you have that scaffolding in place, once paper and digital are working together instead of fighting, you're ready for the final step. The one that turns all of this from a set of techniques into a way of life. The one that makes thinking on paper not just something you do, but something you are. Chapter 9, Live by Hand. You've reached the end of this book, but this isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Everything you've read up to this point, the hand-brain link, the page maps, the messy clarity, the decision frameworks, the emotional processing, the project blueprints, the hybrid workflow, all of it was preparation. Preparation for this moment. The moment when you decide whether this stays a collection of interesting ideas or becomes the operating system for how you think, decide, and live. Most people will close this book, nod appreciatively, and change nothing. They'll go back to mental juggling, back to screen-driven fragmentation, back to the fog, and a year from now, they'll be in the same place, wondering why nothing's different. You're not going to be one of them. Because you've seen something most people never see, that the way you think isn't fixed. It's trainable, and the tool that trains it isn't an app or a course or a hack. It's your hand, your pen, and your page. Simple, ancient, powerful. This chapter is about integration, about pulling everything together into a practice that doesn't just work once but compounds over time, about moving from I'm learning a system to I am someone who thinks on paper. That identity shift, that's what makes this permanent. The journey you've taken. Let's recap what brought you here. You started in the fog, overloaded, distracted, trying to do all your thinking in your head and on screens. You recognized the cost: scattered focus, half-finished projects, decision fatigue, mental exhaustion. You saw that you didn't have a thinking system, just tools for communication and consumption. And you accepted that without a system, your potential would stay locked up. Then you built the foundation, the hand-brain link. You learned that writing by hand doesn't just record thoughts, it creates better ones. You discovered cognitive offloading, kinetic cognition, and the embodied thought loop. You established a daily practice of handwritten thinking, turning your notebook into a tool for clarity instead of just memory. From there, you learned to think spatially. Page maps turned your blank pages into canvases where ideas could spread out, connect, and reveal their structure. You stopped forcing your thinking into lines and started using the whole space: clusters, arrows, timelines, grids. You made the invisible architecture of your thinking visible. Then came permission to be messy. Messy clarity taught you that real thinking looks rough, that crossed-out lines and half-finished ideas aren't failures, they're evidence of your thinking path. You learned to dump, tag, and harvest, to turn chaos into clarity without waiting for perfection. Decision pages gave you a way to stop agonizing and start deciding. You learned to externalize choices, weigh trade-offs on paper, and document your reasoning. You moved from mood-based decisions to system-based ones, from endless loops to locked-in commitments. Emotional ink showed you how to process feelings, not just tasks. You learned to separate facts from stories, to externalize your inner dialogue, and to turn emotional fog into actionable clarity. You stopped letting unprocessed emotions hijack your decisions and relationships. Project blueprints turned vague ambitions into concrete plans. You learned to define outcomes, break them into milestones, and list next actions. You replaced overwhelm with structure. You became someone who finishes, not just someone who starts. And finally, hybrid workflow connected paper and digital. You built a translation layer that lets your notebook and your apps work together instead of fighting. You kept paper as your thinking engine and digital as your execution archive. Each tool feeds the others. Daily sessions generate raw material for maps and decisions. Messy pages surface patterns that inform project plans. Emotional processing clears the noise so you can think strategically. Decision pages lead to blueprints. Blueprints sync into digital systems, and the whole loop repeats, getting sharper each time. This isn't a collection of tricks. It's a coherent practice, a system, and you've been building an identity around it, a deliberate, hand-led thinker. The power you now hold. Here's what you can do now that you couldn't do before. You have control over your inner world. When overwhelm hits, you don't spiral. You open your notebook, you dump the noise, you map the problem. You turn chaotic thoughts into written questions, maps, and plans. You feel grounded because you always have a way to respond, not just react. You have clarity in decisions and direction. Career moves, commitments, investments. You don't make these calls based on how you feel in the moment. You use decision pages. You weigh options. You document your reasoning. You make fewer impulsive choices and more deliberate, documented ones. And you build a track record of decisions you can stand behind and learn from. You have confidence in your ability to execute. You don't rely on motivational bursts or perfect conditions. You rely on project blueprints. You see evidence of your own reliability in completed pages and finished projects. You walk into challenges knowing you can break them down on paper, step by step, until they're done. And this changes your relationships. You communicate more clearly because you process feelings before difficult conversations. You plan key discussions on paper so you speak calmly instead of exploding. You reduce misunderstandings by clarifying what you want to say ahead of time. You become more reliable. You use project blueprints and decision pages for shared goals. You track commitments in your system so you become the person who does what they say, and that consistent follow-through quietly rebuilds or deepens trust. You become a source of stability. You stay steady in conflict because you have tools to process your reactions. You offer clear thinking and structured plans to friends, partners, or colleagues. You become someone others lean on when things feel chaotic. What becomes possible? You can turn any messy problem into a page you can work with. Complex, intimidating challenges, you map them out visibly. You move from vague overwhelm to specific steps and options. You use your pages as anchors when emotion or complexity spikes. You capture and develop ideas instead of losing them. Insights that used to vanish, you collect them in daily sessions and messy pages. You turn sparks into decision pages, plans, or projects quickly. Over months and years, you build a personal library of thinking that compounds. You navigate emotion and pressure with more grace. Big feelings? You manage them on paper instead of with reaction or avoidance. Tough calls under stress? You use your written tools. Uncertain circumstances? You maintain momentum because your system holds you steady. And here's the kicker. The more you practice, the easier it gets. The compounding effect. Over time, page layouts and prompts become unconscious habits. You don't have to think about how to use your notebook. You just reach for the right structure, map, decision page, project blueprint, without conscious effort. Mental effort shifts from how do I do this to what do I want to create. This is automaticity. Your hand learns the moves, the patterns become muscle memory, and what once required deliberate focus now flows naturally. Each notebook you fill adds to your library of patterns and lessons. Reviewing old pages becomes a fast way to spot what works for you. You see recurring themes. You notice which approaches led to breakthroughs and which led to dead ends. You recycle and refine successful strategies faster with each project. This is compounding insight. Your thinking doesn't just improve, it accelerates, because you're not starting from scratch every time. You're building on a foundation of documented experience. And your leverage increases. You solve bigger problems with the same or less effort. You delegate and collaborate more effectively using clear written plans. Your thinking scales. One good page can guide a week of focused work. One solid blueprint can coordinate a team. This is what living by hand looks like long term. Not more work, less. Not more complexity, more clarity. Not more stress, more control. Your first move. Close this book. Right now, go find a notebook and a pen. Don't agonize over which notebook. Don't spend an hour researching the perfect pen. Just grab something. Anything. A cheap spiral notebook and a ballpoint pen will do. The tools don't matter. What matters is that you start. Open to the first page. Write your name and today's date at the top. This is your starting line. This is the moment you commit. Now write this question. What is the most important problem in my life right now? Set a timer for 10 minutes. Write by hand. Don't stop. Don't edit. Don't judge. Just keep the pen moving. Answer the question. Explore it. Let whatever comes up come up. When the timer ends, read what you wrote. Underline one sentence. The one that feels most important. The one that cuts closest to the truth. From that underlined sentence, write, given this, my next step is. Complete that sentence with one small concrete action, something you can do in the next 24 hours, not a vague intention, a specific move. One call, one email, one decision, one conversation. Then do it. Actually do it. And when it's done, come back to your notebook and check it off. That's it. That's your first session. 10 minutes of thinking, one action, one check mark. Do you see what just happened? You turned a vague problem into a written question. You processed it on paper. You identified a next step. You acted on it. You created proof. That's the loop. That's the practice. And if you repeat it daily, weekly, consistently, it will change your life. The fork in the road. This is the moment. The fork. One path leads back to where you were. Mental fog. Screen-driven fragmentation. Good intentions that fade. Ideas that never leave your head. Decisions that loop endlessly. Projects that stall. The slow erosion of confidence that comes from broken promises to yourself. The other path leads forward, to clarity, to control, to a life where your thinking, your decisions, and your actions align, to filled notebooks that prove you showed up, to finished projects that prove you follow through, to a reputation with yourself and others as someone who can be counted on. Most people finish books and change nothing. They nod, they agree, they think, that's a good idea. And then they close the book and go back to their old patterns. Because change is uncomfortable, because new habits are hard, because it's easier to stay stuck than to do something different. But you're not most people. You wouldn't have made it this far if you were. You don't need new tools. You don't need more time. You don't need permission. You need a pen and a page. That's it. Everything else is delay. Everything else is resistance. Trust that clarity comes from writing, not before it. You don't wait until you know what to write. You write to discover what you know. You don't wait until you feel ready. You start, and readiness follows. You can always improve the system. You can refine your layouts. You can adjust your workflow. You can experiment with different prompts and structures. But you can only improve what exists. And it only exists if you begin. The life you're building. Imagine your life 1 year from now. You wake up. You open your notebook, the 5th or 6th one you've filled since starting this practice. You write for 10 minutes. A quick brain dump. A decision that's been nagging you. A project update. Whatever needs attention. You feel clear, grounded, ready. Not because everything's perfect, but because you have a system that works. A system you trust. At work, a complex problem lands on your desk. Instead of panicking, you grab your notebook. You map it out. You see the structure. You identify the leverage points. You design a plan. You show it to your team. They get it immediately. They trust your thinking because you've proven again and again that you can make sense of the mess. At home, a difficult conversation is coming. Instead of avoiding it or blowing up, you process your feelings on paper first. You separate facts from stories. You clarify what you actually want to say. When the conversation happens, you're calm, clear, present. The relationship deepens because you showed up with intention, not reaction. You look at your shelves, filled notebooks, each one a record of your thinking. Each one proof that you didn't just consume ideas, you used them. You built with them. You created a life with them. This is what living by hand looks like. Not as a hobby, not as a side practice, as a way of being. The final commitment. Turn to a fresh page in your notebook right now. At the top, write, "From today I live by hand." Then on the next line, write what that means to you. What are you committing to? Daily sessions? Weekly reviews? Using paper first for decisions and plans? Define it. Make it concrete. Make it yours. And then, this is the most important part, prove it on the next line. Write your first action, the thing you'll do today to make this real. Because words without action are just noise, and you've had enough noise. You're done with vague intentions and broken promises. You're ready for something different. You're ready to think clearly, to decide deliberately, to execute consistently, to live with intention instead of drift. You're ready to live by hand. The page is blank, the pen is in your hand, the rest is up to you. Write.